If a man says this, don't walk, run away. Let me repeat that. Run away, because there's a good chance he won't be able to love you. You know, these days you need a PhD to be out in the dating, mating, and relating realm. Have you noticed that social media content relating to relationships is all centered around a theme of therapy? Let me repeat that, centered around a theme of therapy. Why is that? Why is there so much conversation related to therapy, to human behavior, to psychology? Maybe there's a reason for it, because the reality is human pair bonding is rather difficult. And if you're in midlife, I know you know it's difficult, because it feels like you're putting a square peg in a round hole. Because as we age, we come to the table with a lot more luggage in our lives. Now, I said the word luggage. I'm going to reframe that. A lot of emotional luggage, from childhood wounds to divorce to our physical health to understanding love attachment style. You literally need a PhD, as I said earlier. Now, you might be going, what is love attachment style? Somebody write that down. If you've never heard of it before, I invite you to Google it. Type in love attachment style. And you might find that you in your own life are following patterns. And guess what? Men do as well. I know you've been indoctrinated in the belief that you just need to sit back in your feminine energy and let the man lead, because men are such good leaders of a relationship. They're so fantastically good. Let's just let men lead the relationship. Well, if that were the case, why are there miserable people out in the dating realm if men are the leaders of the relationship? Ladies, for your edification, you are in charge of your relationship destiny. Don't give that to another human being. But as I said before, trying to figure out another human being is almost an art. You have to have a degree in psychology. You've had to study human pair bonding. You've had to study love attachment style. You might have even had to study the imago. What's the imago? If you haven't read the book, Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix and Helen Hunt, highly recommend reading this book. Have you ever found yourself dating somebody who's like your father? Read this book. You might find out that you are actually following a pattern. And what I'm about to share with you regarding men is a pattern that men experience. In fact, what I'm about to share in a few moments is the theme I've noticed in so many of my coaching calls of late. Now, do you guys know, or do you folks know why it's called dating? Do you know why the actual definition of dating in the dictionary is? The definition is, holy shit, trying to figure out another human being is fucking impossible. So they thought, let's just take this definition and we'll come up with this cute word called dating. The reality is trying to figure out another human being, try to bond with another human, is so fantasy based. It's so driven by Disney movies and all the romantic comedies, and it's just supposed to be so darn easy. If you're in midlife, there's a good chance you grow up watching the Brady Bunch. Do you remember the Brady Bunch? You basically had Mike Brady, who was a widower, and Carol Brady, who I thought was also a widower. But in the Brady Bunch movie, we found out she was divorced. Her husband skipped out on her, if that's a true story. But they made it so easy. These two people in midlife joined up together. They each had 3 children and made it look so fantastic easy. And all they had to worry about was whether Marcia got hit by a football, whether Peter's voice changed, or the knapsack race that they had. It was so easy. We were indoctrinated in this belief that human pair bonding is so radically easy. The reality, it isn't. And one common theme I've noticed is a lot of what I call start and stop relationships, lasting about 90 days. In fact, I would say that in the last 30 days, half a dozen of my coaching calls were from women who reached out to me needing some perspective about a short-lived relationship they had. And in each case, these men had this same common theme, thread, I should say, which I'm about to share with you. And by the way, one of the reasons why I have one of my coaching packages is called Get Inside a Guy's Head, where you fill out an extensive questionnaire about the guy. I spend about an hour or two reviewing it and then preparing for a coaching session. And let me tell you something, these Get Inside a Guy's Head coaching sessions are worth every penny of it. So if you want to learn about my coaching, you can schedule a free discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. There's a link in the show notes, okay? Before I do, I want to tell you a personal story that kind of illustrates what I'm about to share with you next. Oh my God, it's been now 10 years. I swear to God, I thought it was like yesterday, but it was 10 years ago. I met a woman through social media, actually my Facebook page. We had some mutual friends and we connected, and we ended up meeting up for a drink. And we had a really nice time, and we met up for a second drink. And during our second drink, I was asking her about her past relationship. She was actually married to a famous musician. And she said, I was in a relationship with a narcissist. And I'm like, okay. I've heard that story before. I said, what happened to the last guy you were in a relationship with? Oh, he was a narcissist. I go, what about the guy before that? He was a narcissist. And what about the guy before that? He was a narcissist. Now, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a narcissist. I'll be her hero. And, and then so we dated for a few weeks. Actually, we dated for about 6 weeks. And the truth is, I just didn't find her very exciting. She was very, very emotionally closed off, and there wasn't a lot of verbal expression from her. So it just didn't feel like I wanted to pursue this relationship. And I eventually ended the relationship. Can you guess what she wrote on social media the next day? Can you guess? Let's see if you can guess. Write it down. Bump, bump, bump. Another narcissist was literally the comment. By the way, I didn't warrant that because I didn't do any gaslighting. I apologize for when I was late. I mean, I took ownership of my life. And so I'm telling you this story because one of the facets, I learned a big lesson in that experience. When I listened to her share about her past relationships, she had a common theme. And as I was thinking about it, I was giving her grace because I know I'd like to think I'm not a narcissist. Human folks, I can be self-centric. I can be righteous. I can be myopic. There's a lot of human beings that can be self-centric, righteous, or myopic, but that doesn't necessarily make them a clinical narcissist, okay? In fact, most humans in the dating marketplace are a bit myopic or self-centric because we're operating from having our own needs met. We're not necessarily thinking about it from another person's needs. But I'm sharing this story because it was so fascinating to me because I teach in my coaching, I teach vetting, I teach discernment. And it was so fascinating to me how I wore rose-colored glasses when the clues were like the sirens were going off in front of me. The sirens were literally around me when she shared a bit of her past experience. Now, one thing I've noticed with a lot of people in the dating realm today is that they're actually bonding through mutual trauma. In some ways, in her particular case, I'm sure that if I joined in with her and said, oh my God, my exes were all narcissists, we could have bonded through this experience of feeling used, feeling gaslit, feeling betrayed. But that didn't happen in this particular case. But I find many of you experience what I call trauma bonding connections, meaning you're bonding through your mutual traumas. And that's not the healthiest way to approach a relationship. I'm sure you've experienced this. I know many of you have suffered childhood wounds or adult traumas, particularly trauma of going through a divorce. And divorce is a traumatic experience. We can't discount the emotional effects of unraveling the tapestry of your life with another human being and then reintegrating into your own life. I can speak from personal experience. I know many of you. Raise your hand and say, yes, I can relate to that, Jonathan, that going through a divorce, and roughly 75% of singles in the dating marketplace today who are over 45 years old are divorced. And there's a common thread amongst many of the men and women who are in the dating marketplace today because of this emotionally draining and oftentimes very challenging experience. Okay, so what does a man say that should make you not just walk, but run away? Bump, 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 bump. Okay, if he literally does this, it's my ex-wife's fault, or it's my ex's fault. In other words, it's all 100% her fault why the relationship ended. She was a narcissist. She was an alcoholic. She was abusive. She was mean to the children. The list can go on and on and on when a man and or a woman puts 100% blame of the relationship to the other person. Let me repeat that. When somebody says, and I know many of you are going, well, in my particular case, it's true. It was 100% the other person's fault. Folks, when somebody doesn't take any ownership on their part in the ending of the relationship, and you haven't asked this follow-up question, you are setting yourself up for disaster. In fact, if you haven't read the book, Are You the One for Me by Barbara DeAngelis? Someone write this in the chat box. Are You the One for Me by Barbara DeAngelis. By the way, there's a list of books I recommend below called Jonathan Recommend Books. It's listed there. Why I'm recommending this book is you must pay close attention. When their past relationship is 100% the other person's fault, and they haven't at least done this one thing afterwards, you are setting yourself up for a potential start and stop with this man and or woman if you're a man watching this. And that is they haven't done deep therapy to heal. Now, I say deep therapy. I know that sounds kind of ominous a bit, but just to have done some therapy. But in the particular case of the half a dozen women who reached out to me recently, I can tell you the common theme where the men blame the women 100% for the ending of their marriages or their past relationships, and they did zero therapy. They did zero healing because they didn't believe that they needed healing, because they didn't take ownership. And guess what happened in most of these cases? Do you know what's funny? In these half a dozen clients I've had, half of the men went back to the woman that the relationship ended. In fact, if they had ended a relationship within the last 3 to 6 months, that's another thing. Be careful, be careful, be careful. You know, a few weeks ago, I was talking to a woman on a dating site, and she emailed me, and we got on the telephone, and within 5 minutes, I asked, hey, when did your last relationship end? She said last night. She said last night. I said, I'll talk to you in 6 months. She goes, no, it was over for years. In fact, it was well over a year ago. And she was and it ended last night, and she's on a dating app. Folks, when you get that kind of situation, don't walk, run away. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole with her. There's no way I'm going to take that risk. Folks, if it's 100% their ex's fault, they haven't taken at least 3%. In fact, I recently, last year, I had on my channel Catherine Woodward Thomas. If you're not familiar with the author of Calling in the One, Catherine Woodward Thomas. Okay. She's a very dear friend of mine. In fact, I just called her last week. I needed some dating advice, and I called Catherine because she's a dear friend of mine. But she wrote a book called Conscious Uncoupling. You probably heard of Gwyneth Paltrow talk about this. Well, Catherine coined this term, and she wrote a beautiful book about this. And she talks about the importance that even if it's the other person's fault, you have to take ownership of 3%, at a minimum of 3% ownership. And your ownership isn't, oh, I should learn how to avoid a narcissist. That's not ownership, okay? By the way, now here's what happens. When a man blames the woman or the woman blames the man, they look like the hero because they look like a victim. Let me repeat that. They look like a hero because they look like a victim. Folks, I'm here to say when somebody shares with you about their past experience, just like that woman I told you, the ex-husband was a narcissist, the boyfriend before that was a narcissist, the boyfriend before that narcissist, and of course, I was a knucklehead and I didn't follow up. What part did you take? but I was just part of her cycle. I don't want you to find yourself part of someone else's cycle. When you hear that, don't walk, run away, because the likelihood of them being able to be ready for a relationship, unless they've done some healing work. Folks, I started this conversation talking about how much social media is just inundated with therapy centered around relationships. And sadly, men are less likely to go seek therapy. Men are less likely to do personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. When I say less likely, I would say it's 60-40. Women do it more so than men. I'm just throwing out a rough number. I know many of you are going, no, Jonathan, it's like 90-10 or it's 95-5. No, I'm going to tell you something. I've been out in the dating market realm since my significant relationship ended, and I would venture to say 60% of the women hadn't done any therapy, hadn't done any personal development, self-help, spiritual work. They haven't done any real bump, self-love work. Many of you know I wrote a book called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? A Journey of Personal Development, Self-Help, and Spiritual Work. There's a link below to get a copy of my book. You know, it's interesting about doing therapy and doing work. First off, if you've done therapy or some sort of personal development work, hit that like button. If you have, write it in the comments. Jonathan, I've been doing personal development work. Now, meditation and yoga doesn't count. Okay. Not to suggest meditation and yoga isn't, valuable, but it doesn't count. I'm talking about deep introspective work to go through unpacking what happened and then rebuilding oneself from this experience. It's sad that we need a PhD to be in the dating realm. But I'm going to tell you, there are fantastic books like the ones I just shared with you that can make such a difference in your life. I can't begin to tell you how much great information is out there. And believe me, if you spend 1 year, if you spend every day, 1 hour a day, reading the books I recommend, all the books I recommend, I guarantee you 1 year from now, you are going to be such a different person. You are going to become a magnetic attractor for what you want. Take that in, breathe that in. You will become a magnetic attractor for what you want. And I know this because I get calls each week from a client that's worked with me. It's amazing. The minute they make investment in themselves, I get calls each week. Jonathan, I met a great guy. Jonathan, I met a great guy. Jonathan, I met a great guy. And they know the difference. I can tell you, when you do that introspective and inner work, it will make a huge difference in your life. If a man blames his previous, of all the blame for the previous relationships on the woman, don't walk away, run, because there's a limited chance he's going to be able to lean into a healthy, happy relationship. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? Please let me know if it is. Post a comment below. I do my best to read them all in the first 24 hours. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button right now. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of new videos. And if you want to connect with me directly, hey, you can schedule a free call with me. There's links below to schedule a discovery call, to join my group called Midlife Love Mastery, to follow me on Instagram, to get all the books I recommend. You can even get my dating vows, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, all listed below.